and it very much applies to whether or not we exercise. So what do we do with this? The best thing to do is to just do it. Again, ritualize it, not analyze it too much. Just go ahead and exercise. 3-4 times a week is good for you. Just do it. And again, it's the 5-minute takeoff. The subconscious mind will try and tell you, don't do it, you don't have time. There are other things, you'll do it tomorrow. Next week you'll start the regime. The subconscious mind is very smart in its attempt and will do anything that it can almost to create this congruency. And when you go out and exercise and you show yourself, yes, I am worthy of happiness, very often the subconscious mind will follow suit. So just do it. The second thing is recognize, this is on the cognitive level, recognize how important physical exercise is. Remember what Marty Seligman said, we mostly focus on neck up, and we do it as psychologists, we do it as students in an academic institution, especially in a place like this. So much is about thinking and cognition. That's how you got here. That's how you were successful. But it's no less important to think about neck down. In fact, the mind alone can only take us so far when it comes to happiness, which is why I told you, if I were a therapist, a prerequisite for me to treat people would be to have them exercise regularly, because I don't want to fight nature. I want to work with nature and build on it. Exercise, in many ways, is the unsung hero of psychological interventions. It helps on so many levels. John Ratey, mentioned him, Harvard Medical School professor, psychiatrist. In a way, exercise can be thought of as psychiatrist's dream treatment. It works on anxiety, on panic disorder, and on stress in general, which has a lot to do with depression. And it generates the release of neurotransmitters, norepinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine, that are very similar to our most important psychiatric medicines. Having a bout of exercise is like taking a little bit of Prozac and a little bit of Ritalin right where it is supposed to go. The exact right amount of it, the exact right location, and without side effects, or with side effects, positive side effects, physical as well as mental and emotional side effects. What John Ratey is calling for in his wonderful, wonderful book, just came out recently in this January, what he calls for is an exercise revolution. And he backs up this call with a lot of scientific evidence of why it is so important. Let me share with you just one area that he talks about. He talks about all ages. He talks about kids, adults, as well as the elderly population. And it has positive effects for every age, from 0 to 120. Let me talk about a couple of studies and findings that were implemented, where exercise was implemented in schools. So there are a few schools that introduced physical exercise as an integral part of its curriculum. For example, and this has been replicated in a few schools, every morning 45 minutes of some form of exercise. Usually running, sometimes rowing, cycling, climbing. There's a school that in New Jersey that actually put a climbing wall where students exercised. But some form of aerobic exercise, sometimes intertwined with interval training, every morning before school, 45 minutes a day. Some of the schools had it later during the day, most of them in the morning. Here are some of the results from some of these schools that actually introduced it. Obesity levels, not surprising, went down. For example, in Naperville in Illinois, in the district there where physical exercise was introduced in school, which is, by the way, interesting, because in most schools, just yesterday I gave a talk at Horace Mann, and the teachers told me that in many of the schools in New York, physical exercise is being taken out rather than more of it is introduced. Physical exercise and art, both taken out. Why? Because they have to get the grades. Neck up. And that's a pity, and they pay a price. So obesity in the school in Naperville, or in the district Naperville in Illinois, obesity levels went down from 30% to 3% among the students. That has repercussions not just for the students' lives there, that they're more comfortable, that they're happier. It has repercussions and consequences for the rest of their lives. They're much less susceptible and prone to the chronic illnesses, such as cancer, heart failure. It's a win-win on so many levels, much less susceptible to diabetics. So that's obesity. What they also find at Naperville is that the grades went up significantly. In fact, usually the U.S. doesn't do very well when it comes to those international tests, math and science tests that they do. I think it's usually in 8th grade. Well, Naperville is an exception. They scored number 6 in the world in mathematics and number 1 in the world in science. Now, people argue, well, Naperville is an affluent neighborhood or district, and it's true. How about other places? Well, they introduced exercise in very poor areas, in inner cities. For example, in Titusville, Pennsylvania, where many people are way below, where the average is way below the average income for the state. When before they introduced exercise, school performance, they were significantly below state average, Pennsylvania's average. After introducing exercise, within a year, they went up to 17% above state average, with the only change being that year introducing physical exercise. They've seen this in other schools, in other districts as well. And what they also saw in the same school, in Titusville, that fist fights, for example, they noticed violence disappeared completely as a result of the exercise. What they found also in a school in Iowa, where they introduced physical exercise, disciplinary problems went down from 225 to 95 in 1 year. In another school in Kansas, also inner city, disciplinary problems went down by 67% after they introduced exercise. We're much less likely to be violent. It calms us. It brings us to our natural state of being, which is much calmer as opposed to being angry and upset. And people need to let out that steam. And unfortunately, very often that steam is let out in fights with aggression. And this is a much healthier way to divert that healthy energy